Hello my friends and welcome to this video today. So in today's video I want to talk about how to maximize the quality of your drone footage. If you happen to have a drone and if you are new to the drone universe, this video might be for you because, as I said, I want to explain how to set up your drone to get the best quality videos and photos possible from your device and just make the most of it. So stay tuned and let's go. So this is actually part 2 of my video series about drones for beginners. And in part 1 I explained a little bit more about legal aspects and what drones are out there. And in this video I, as I said, want to explain how to set up your drone perfectly. So when I talk about drones on this channel, I talk about DJI drones because I only use DJI drones ever. And yeah, I think it is by far the most important and most well-known drone brand out there for off-the-shelf photography and cinematography drones. And in this specific case, I'm talking about the DJI Air 3, which is a super famous model. It just got an update, the Air 3S. They are phenomenal drones. But this video is not just for people with a DJI Air 3. If you happen to own a DJI drone, this video is also for you because, the DJI menu settings, they are more or less identical across the board. I've had plenty of different drones from DJI, for example, the Mini 3 Pro, the Mavic 2 Pro, and honestly, the menu was always pretty identical to each other, so you can basically adapt to your special drone and use this video for yourself as well. So let's get started now. I will switch over now to the DJI menu screen so that I can explain you in more detail what I set up with my drone and what is important, what might not be so important. So yeah, let's go. So here we are now in the main menu screen of the DJI Air 3. As I said, this video is focused on the DJI Air 3, however you can adapt this video basically to all the newer DJI drones. It's more or less the same. There are slight differences, but I explain that in a second. So yeah, let's start first. So we need to go to Go Fly here now. So we can go to the menu, to the camera menu, and change our settings. So let's go to the menu, which is in the upper right corner here, the 3 small dots. You can press on that. And then you have basically all the settings. So we are going to the camera setting. This is, for this video, obviously the most important one. And here we are in the camera setting page. So let's begin. The video format, as you can see, is set to MP4, which is great. It is super compatible. It is a good video format and you cannot change this here. So let's stick with MP4 because we have to, and it is a solid choice. Above that, we have the so-called coding format. The coding format decides how your video files are going to be compressed. And in this case, when you are in the normal mode, you have H.264 and H.265. Differences is that H.265 compresses your video in a different way. So H.265 is a more efficient video formatting codec compared to H.264, which means it compresses the video a little bit more while still maintaining a better quality in the video overall. So you could say, okay, let's go with H.265, and I would actually recommend that to you, but only if you plan on post-processing your videos and edit them afterwards. Because if you want to post them right away from the drone basically, or from your phone when you transfer the files, then I would recommend going with H.264 because it is much more compatible. Like for example, when you post on YouTube or other social media platforms, H.264 is wider accepted. So I would recommend going with H.264 if you do not plan on editing your videos. But we talk about what if I plan on editing my videos and make the absolutely most of my drone. And in this case, I would go with H.265, as I said. After that, you have the color settings above that. You can see it here. So in the color menu, you have basically 3 different options. You have the normal, you have the HLG option and the D-Log-M option. And D-Log-M is the setting that might change throughout the drone setup from DJI. Some drones, like for example the DJI Mini 3 Pro that I used to own, it only had the D-Cine-like setting here, and other drones, like for example the Mavic Pros, Mavic 3 Pros for example, I believe they have the full D-Log capability, which this drone, the DJI Air 3, doesn't have. So all these 3 different settings, in all of these cases, the footage will be somewhat pre-processed, meaning that the camera films it and processes the footage, and then you get a final image. So if you go with the normal mode, you have a processed image that looks, yeah, pretty okayish, honestly. You have basically a balanced picture with, yeah, vibrant colors, with high contrasts, which, yeah, sounds great in the first moment, but it is not great if you want to edit your pictures and files and videos afterward. This is because it, yeah, really cuts away a lot of your dynamic range, for example, and you will not get the full potential. Same with HLG. HLG is arguably a little bit better than the normal mode. You have a higher dynamic range, for example, and it is also great if you have, for example, a television that supports HDR. So yeah, it is not bad, but as I said, it's also not great if you want to post-process your videos. In this case, I would go with the D-Log M format. So the D-Log M format gives you the biggest file sizes, but it also gives you with that the most informations in your videos. So for example, you have the most dynamic range, the most details in your shadows, in your highlight, and overall the most possibilities if you want to edit your files later. And this is not an if, because you basically have to edit your files afterwards. The D-Log M profile, it looks very, very flat and very grayish. You will not have a lot of contrast from the beginning on. You will not have a lot of colors from the beginning on. I will show you a few example clips here, because yeah, you really cannot use this footage for anything other than if you want to edit it. You need an editing software and you need to process this video afterwards so that you can unlock your full potential. But that is a topic for another video. But as I said, if you want to have the best quality, you definitely have to use D-Log M for the most informations and for the best quality in your video. And as you can also see, the coding format is set to H.265 automatically here, so you cannot change this in this case. Then what you can see here is the color display assist. So basically the color assist will simulate natural colors while you still shoot in the D-Log M format, which means if you look while filming, you will see, yeah, natural vibrant colors and not this grayish mess basically that D-Log M is. And yeah, you can get a better feeling for what you're actually filming and how it might look later on. So it is basically a display LUT, if you want to call it like this. But yeah, as I said, I have deactivated it because I really don't need it and I want to see how it looks when I film it in D-Log M, even though that is not the final result. But I know a lot of people who are relying on this and use it because it is actually a great tool, and that's just my personal preference that I don't use it. However, as I said, I would likely recommend switching that one on for someone else. So now let's switch to the other settings here down below. So first of all, you have the histogram here. You can activate it, then you will be displayed with a histogram in your live view. And this is honestly a pretty good option. And as I said, a lot of people use that. I use that as well. For example, on my main camera, I always have the histogram activated, or most of the time at least. However, when it comes to these drones, I deactivate it most of the times, not always, because I find it a little bit distracting, honestly. And yeah, when I fly around, I want to focus myself on flying the drone and getting the best shots and don't have thousands of different, yeah, basically informations on my screen. I want to keep it simple, and I measure the exposure with the exposure meter, which is always displayed on the live view. So I really don't need the histogram in addition to that. But as I said, the histogram itself is a great tool and you might want to use it. You can try it out. But yeah, as I said, if you're starting out, I would recommend leaving this off and yeah, rely on the exposure meter. Same goes with the exposure warning. Basically, it is what it says. You get an exposure warning when you are too dark or too bright. And honestly, you don't really need that because you have the exposure meter. It will show you if you are correctly lit or not. So yeah, I really don't need the exposure warning here. So let's come to the next point here, the next menu point, which is called grid lines. And grid lines is super important. So I always have, yeah, basically my grid line set to this rectangular shape where you have a line basically on every third of the image, horizontal and vertically. So you have the cross sections on the rule of third points basically. And yeah, this is a pretty great feature. For example, if you have a subject you want to fly around or you want to fly towards to, you can just place it in one of these corners basically, and you will get a nice and well looking picture, or in this case video. So I think this is a pretty great tool, and I would definitely recommend switching that on so you can get a better feeling for your composition while you film it. The frame guide is somewhat similar to this grid lines. It will give you some additional information if you film, for example, landscapes, how you can place the subjects there. Me personally, I don't need it. If you want to have these tips, you can obviously switch it on. It will give you the tips then while you're flying. As I said, I want to keep it simple for me when I'm flying, so I have this one turned off. Next up, we come to the focus peaking. And focus peaking on drones, it is actually good to have, but I don't need it because I fly in the autofocus mode most of the time. I have it set to normal because sometimes in very rare situations I focus the drone manually, but as I said, I don't need it that often. And basically focus peaking is what it says, what you have in focus. It will gives you a visual reference, what is in focus, and then you can see where your focus point lays. This is for cameras, for example, amazing. I always have focus peaking on my camera because I use manual focus all the time there. But as I said, for drones, most of the time I will not use the manual focus. So after that, we have the white balance settings. And same goes for that basically. You can choose manual white balance, then you have to adjust it manually as it says. Me personally, I think the drone does a pretty good job with the white balance, so I have it to automatic basically all of the time, but you can play around it when you are more comfortable. For example, with flying the drone, you can try to play around with the manual white balance, and then you can see if you can do it better than the drone, or if you think the drone does it wrong sometimes, then you can change it. But as I said, for me personally, I think the auto setting is pretty good. Below that, we have the so-called style settings. So let's activate this for a moment. So basically, as I said, this drone, no matter what you change in the settings, it will automatically process your image that you will get. So for example, I think the automatic sharpness, it is a little bit too much, so I put here the value -2 in because I don't want that much artificial sharpening basically. This is the same problem that most smartphones, for example, have. They sharpen the images way too much and it just looks not natural anymore. So as I said, I put that down a little bit. Noise reduction, me personally, I think the noise reduction, the automatic noise reduction from the drone is good as it is. I don't need to change anything here. So this is set to 0. I don't know, when I first started the drone up, it might had some higher value than 0. I don't really know, but I put it to 0 because I think a little bit of noise reduction is okay, a little bit of automatic noise reduction, but you don't want too much because your pictures start to look really mushy and really not that great, honestly. So as I said, sharpness to -2, noise reduction to 0, but this is also up to you. You can change the settings according to your liking. You can try it out, play around with it a little bit, and just take a look at the videos that you took and decide what is the best value for you and what your personal preferences is for that values. So this is basically it for the video settings, at least for the most important ones. So let's now go to the camera setting when it comes to photo. And believe me, this is much simpler than the camera settings for the video mode. So let's switch to that one. First of all, you have to switch from the video mode here to the photo mode here. And then you basically do the same again, go to the 3 small dots up here, go to the camera setting, and then you see that the setting looks a little bit different this time. So as I said, this is pretty straightforward. I think anyone that has ever had something to do with photography knows that you basically need to shoot RAW if you want the best quality. So there's no way around that. As I said, the photos will not look as stunning, for example, if you shoot it in JPEG, because JPEG really processes the pictures a lot. So I would definitely recommend going with RAW. If you want to post your images instantly on Instagram or social media, you could go with JPEG and RAW. In this case, you would have a JPEG file to post, and then you still had a RAW file that you could then later edit and make the most of it. So you can decide that for yourself, but for me only RAW is enough because I always edit my pictures. So this is good for me. Next up, you have the aspect ratio. You could choose 4:3 or 16:9. 4:3 is a more standard photo aspect ratio. 16:9 is more or less a video aspect ratio, normal video aspect ratio. So yeah, you can decide that for yourself. Me personally, I go with 16:9 because yeah, you can crop the photo later on and then you have 4:3 if you want it, and I rather have all the informations and all the details in the picture and yeah, crop in later. So yeah, I go with 16:9. Next up, the resolution. As said, it depends on your personal needs. I would say if you just want to post pictures on Instagram or yeah, social media in general, 12 megapixels is more than enough. Me personally, I like to print my pictures and yeah, have just the most possible information that I can get off my camera. So I use 48 megapixels. As said, if you want to print them and print them a little bit larger, 48 megapixels, it's definitely recommended. So I think you should go with 48 megapixels in any case, because yeah, better have it than need it. So yeah. And the file sizes, they are not this big, so honestly, I think yeah, 40 megapixel is a solid choice. Down below here, you have again histogram and exposure warning. It is the same as in the video section. You can decide it for yourself. Definitely, again, would recommend adding these grid lines so you can compose your shot better. So yeah, choose the grid lines there. White balance the same, we talked about that before. Peaking level, we talked about that before also. So basically that's already it when it comes to the photo settings. You see, it is pretty straightforward. The last thing I want to talk about today is yeah, some basic videography settings that you need to know when you want to do cinematic videos. So basically I set up my drone on a tripod there, and the drone is looking over my desk right now, so I can show you a few different settings. So we are again in the main screen here, in the screen that you would also use if you are in flight right now. And you can see the different settings here. So first of all, you see this little camera button down here, which says Pro right now. You can change that to automatic. Then you will get an automatic exposure, but I would recommend going with the Pro mode, quote unquote, because yeah, you have obviously more controls over what you are doing. And first of all, you can decide which resolution you want to shoot in. You have the 1080p, you have a 1080p vertical video, for example, when you do social media and yeah, TikTok, Instagram Reels, stuff like that, you can choose the vertical mode. And yeah, I would definitely not recommend the vertical mode because, as I said, it is just a crop of the 4K video, and yeah, you can just shoot in 4K and crop in later, and you have still the possibility to get a full widescreen video, which is always better in my opinion. So yeah, I would definitely choose to shoot in 4K on this drone. It gives you the most possibilities for the post-production. After that, you have to decide for a frame rate that you want to choose in. I would recommend going with 60 FPS, honestly, if the lighting conditions are okay, because you can always slow the video down afterward. And yeah, as I said, you have the most possibilities if you go with 60 FPS, but you could also go, for example, with like 30 FPS or 24 FPS even, if you want to shoot, for example, something that looks like a movie in the cinema. It always has 24 FPS, so this would be an option. So yeah, as I said, I would go with 60 FPS, and yeah, you can even slow the footage down and still get nice looking and smooth video. So, but this is up to you, and it also depends on the circumstances and what you want to use your footage for. So here we are back in the main menu, basically on the main live view screen. So now you can choose, for example, your ISO. And I would recommend going with a maximum of 800 with the ISO, because above that, especially when you have a zoom lens on your drone, or in this case the DJI Air 3 zoom lens, basically everything above 800 is really noisy, so yeah, not really usable anymore. So I would definitely recommend not going over 800, and if it's possible, stay between 200, maybe 100. These are both great. 400 is also okay still, but as I said, maximum 800. After that, you have to decide for a shutter speed. And the basic rule is to get a smooth video with nice motion blur, but not too much motion blur, to choose a value that is double that of your frame rate. So for example, we have just chosen a frame rate of 60 frames per second. So in this case, we would have to go with 1/120th of a second as a shutter speed. That is the basic rule. If we, for example, would have chosen 30 frames per second, we had to change this to 1/60th of a second. And especially when you're flying during the day and outside in bright sun, these can get too bright very, very quickly. even if you shoot ISO 100 and 1/20th of a second, which looks very dark now, but outside when the sun is shining it is way too bright. And in this case you would need something like that here. This is a neutral density filter, ND filter. It basically is a sunglass for your camera and it makes it darker. So you put that in front of your drone. I can show you that. You can put that one right in front of the lens of your drone, and then you can artificially make it darker outside, if you want to call it like this. And yeah, so that you can choose the right values and get nice video quality. And yeah, you don't have to worry about putting up your shutter speed too high. But as I said, this is the general rule, this double of the frame rate shutter speed. However, I found out that it honestly doesn't make such a big difference if you go, for example, like to 1/160th of a second or even 1/200th. It still will look more or less the same. There are some details. For example, if you do close proximity flying, then there will be a few differences because you are very close to your subject and the motion blur becomes very apparent. And in this case, yeah, as I said, you will see a little bit of a difference, but if you are far away from your subject, it really doesn't matter. So if you have to choose a faster shutter speed, do it. Better have a video than have no video at all of, for example, some beautiful mountain or something beautiful in nature out there. So yeah, always adapt a little bit to the situation. But as I said, ND filters are super handy and I would definitely recommend buying ND filters for your drone. It will step up your video game a lot. So yeah, would definitely recommend that. So below that in the main menu here you have the before mentioned exposure meter, which goes from -3 stops to +3 stops. And yeah, as I said, I would rely on that. It is pretty good and I would rely on that more than on your screen basically. So if the exposure meter says your image is too dark, it is too dark. As I said, it is a pretty good and important tool. So these are basically the most important settings when you want to make videos and photos with your drone. There are a ton of more tips, but I will talk about that in another video. For now, I switch back to my desk and then, yeah, I will give you a few more words on this video today. So here we are back at my desk basically, and I hope you found this video somewhat interesting and helpful. So that's basically it for this video. As I said, this is part 2 of my video series about drones for beginners. I will do more videos in this series. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And if you're interested in photography and videography as well, you might also want to take a look at my channel because I have plenty of other videos about photography related topics there. So yeah, feel free to check that out. But for now, I wish you a great day, a great week, and I hope I see you in next week's video. So I see you then and goodbye.